Hello and welcome to the Human Echoes recap for Game of Thrones Season 6, Episode 10, The Winds of Winter.
I'm Tony Southcott.
I'm Albert Berg.
And this soundtrack is brought to you by Rahman Jawadi. Holy crap, was that good.
I don't know whom I don't understand the reference. I'm not smart enough.
The composer that made the music.
Okay. Just the music for Game of Thrones?
He did the original composition for the series, for the opening sequence, but he also did this episode.
Okay, there's a lot of good music in this episode. Now that you bring it up, there's a lot of sort of great variations on that theme. That's not really what we're here to talk about.
Yeah,
but,
I'm just saying, that was immediately, you're seeing all this stuff happen, and you're just hearing it go on for, 20 minutes in the background. And it's perfect, and he was also the guy that did Pacific Rim and a bunch of other cool stuff.
Dinklage, Peter Dinklage.
There's a lot to cover in this episode, so strap yourselves in. We're going to get right to it.
Kicking it with the trial in King's Landing. We get, starting out with the Tyrells. Marjorie's brother gets called before Sir Loras gets called before the Septons, and all the fight is gone out of him. He is done fighting or having any pride or anything. And I mean, part of it I'm sure is because she told him, "Hey, it'll be okay. They'll let you go. Just do what they say." But you can tell that this has not been a great time for him. He is messed up.
I mean, best case scenario for him is they let him be part of the faith, where he renounces his lordship and basically walks around looking intense with a scar on his forehead the rest of his life.
Yes, which certain Lannisters do really well, until this episode at least. And it was interesting to see that she was not okay with the scar thing. She's like, "What?
You mutilated him.
You damaged the goods." It was, and they don't have a Cersei and Jaime thing going on. I didn't quite get why she was so concerned about his forehead after he had been locked in prison for so long.
I think it's just the violence of what happened, watching somebody carve into your brother's forehead.
I do also want to give a shout out to the opening of this scene and seeing everybody getting ready and prepping and coming into the courtroom. There's a lot of sort of really, really great little cinematic moments and editing things going on in this whole episode, but that in particular. And it's not like one, it kind of jumps around from location to location to location, and you really see the scale of all the people who are going to be here, which is going to pay off in just a little bit.
Yeah, you're seeing Cersei get kind of strapped into this black dress with actual, shoulder pauldrons and things like that, so it looks like she's more going to war than going to trial. You've got Robert Strong stopping Tommen as he's getting up to go. You've got all these different people. You see the Maester getting ready, and he's got his whore, his bed, and everything. He's doing his standard thing. Everybody's just getting ready. They're all heading to the Sept of Baelor.
And then, everything goes down with Loras. He pleads guilty.
They killed my haircut.
And then we start to notice that Cersei's still not there.
Yeah, you start to see the little birds floating around the city. You're seeing just these little quick clips of Qyburn's kids, basically. Not his, actual kids, but the kids that work for him. Kind of leading people around and following people into different areas.
And one of the what is the Lannister's name who's worth the sparrows now?
Lancel.
Lancel, sees one of them, chases him down into the underside of the city, and I'm just going to say it, but the way it builds up is really great, and it takes a long time to reveal, but he finds that Cersei has planted all of these wildfire charges. I mean, not by herself, obviously. Qyburn has helped and probably had his little bird friends help. And
it's a lot of wildfire. They fill the entire crypt with these barrels, and at first you don't really see what it is. You see the little bird come up and just shank him right in the spine. And
right before that, Pycelle got, stabbed, Children of Sorrow style.
Yeah.
Not that many people have seen that movie, but you should.
It was
never watch it again because it's disturbing.
It was like Leaf, whenever she died for Bran, back in the episode whenever they're running towards the door. Just 50 different stab wounds, just over and over and over again. It was not a very good end for Maester Pycelle.
He deserved it.
I know.
There's a lot of people getting what they deserved in this episode. And even though I don't know that the High Sparrow deserved what he got, there was something satisfying about this about knowing that this was Cersei's plan, about knowing that she put this into action. I was getting excited for her. I was like, oh, she's got everybody where she wants them, and she's got Wildfire there, and it's gonna blow up, and they're all gonna be dead. She's watching from far away, and she's got her kids. It'll be all good.
And then you've got the High Sparrow, like Marjorie, straight up saying, like, we need to leave here. She's not here. Something is going on. Like, you don't understand her. Like, let's get out. And he's having his goons kind of keep everybody in the Sept,
which takes, we've been going back and forth on how honest he is through this whole thing, and I think this more than anything gives me the best possible belief that he is as honest as he can be in this universe and with the power that he has, because if he doesn't suspect her to be as nefarious as she is, he must not have that same nefariousness in his heart.
Yeah, he's not thinking of all the possible scenarios. He's thinking like, oh, at worst, we're just going to have to go and have enough people overwhelm Robert Strong and take her.
Right, and that is not how it goes. Somehow, we see that, the explosion is huge, to the point where they don't talk about this, and this is the kind of thing that I'm looking forward to reading the book about, because I imagine this is going to play out. That explosion in King's Landing, in that era/setting, I know it's not a legitimate era, but they didn't have fire departments, and they did have wood and straw as major components of building things. So that fire that she started isn't just, it's not a controlled explosion. She didn't set, shaped charges in the Sept of Baelor to bring it down. She's bringing down a good, chunk of the city.
Well, you're seeing the bells crush people and buildings on all just in all blocks around it, just getting completely immolated. And the first thing that she might be having to deal with as queen, which that'll come in a little bit, is she might be having some sort of rebellion, because the people were starting to get really behind the idea of the church, and a union between the king and the church.
Yeah, Cersei continues to be. She's. I guess she's smarter than the people in the Sept, at least smarter than the High Sparrow, but she still is only thinking one move ahead. And that is not how you play the Game of Thrones.
Yeah, it's not. She's not on Littlefinger's level. She's gotten lucky a few times, but she's also just more violent than a lot of people are willing to get as well. It does
help that she's got a little bit of Ramsay Bolton in her. She's not. Well, in the next scene with her and the nun, it takes it a little bit even further.
Yeah,
but she's definitely got the monster. I don't care who I have to hurt to get what I want kind of thing going on.
Yeah, especially now that her kids are gone. Oh, that comes in a little bit too.
Yeah, that's coming up. First we get her and the nun, and again this was very, very satisfying, because she's been suffering at the hands of this, not technically a nun, I don't know what they're called, one of the ladies of the church, the Septon, or the Sept, I'm sorry, the Septon is the people in the church, the Septonette.
I can't remember. I know that there's a specific title for it, but I'm actually not seeing it here.
I didn't write it down. I wrote down Cersei and the nun in my notes.
Yeah, I wrote Cersei and the nun. It's all about just the costume anyway. You guys know who we're talking about. You watched 20 minutes ago.
And she, says to her, hey, you're going to be the last face I see before you die.
It's a Septa.
Septa, okay.
Septa Unella.
She says, well, I'm not afraid to die, take me. And she's like, oh, no, I didn't mean today. You're gonna get to be real good friends with Robert Strong first. We see we didn't get to see much of his face. He does take his helmet off though, which I think pretty much squashes that fun fan theory that it was her son under there.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that that theory is gone. They could, but him taking the helmet off kind of implies that she's seen it under there, and I don't think she would nonchalantly be okay with her son's head being on the mountain and everything else.
Yes, no, especially after what happens next. But we do, she shuts the door and she just says, shame, shame, shame. And again, despite the fact that she's utterly despicable, it is still satisfying to see her get her revenge.
Well, even the way she's talking to the Septa, she's just like, I do this because it feels good. I do this because it feels good. And everything she does is the antithesis of what the church wants from her. And she's the one in control. She's the one who literally pretty much just planted charges in the Vatican and is killing everybody. Like
she's remember the member of the 5th of Novembering though.
Yeah.
Only they actually the gunpowder treason actually worked.
Yeah, if Guy Fawkes wouldn't have been as drunk as he was at the time, it might have worked.
All right, now let's not cast aspersions. Or maybe we should. I don't know enough about the history. Let's just move on to fake stuff happening.
Well, there's a lot of people that say that if Guy Fawkes wouldn't have been like falling down drunk, he probably would have had it work, but he was drinking because of his nerves.
Okay. Well, next up, we do get a guy who maybe should drink a little bit more, but doesn't. And we finally see the fulfillment of that part of the prophecy that Cersei had gotten from the witch, which was...
all of her children would die before she does.
Their gold shall be their crowns, and gold their shrouds. And Tommen just...
just let go. Like, he had seen his entire kingdom, like, falling out of his control. He's seen his wife, who he knows is over there, is dead. Her family is dead. His mom's a monster. And he's just this weak, little, like, malleable guy. And he just can't take it.
I liked I watched this sort of after show thing they talk about, their little After the Thrones, and they talked about, one of the things they pointed out was that Cersei was down in the dungeon sort of lording it over the nun while this is happening.
Yeah.
If she would have been there, she could have talked him down, but she was getting her revenge, she was having her fun, and because she was not there, he couldn't handle it, or possibly realized that he would be talked out of it if she came up there. This is maybe the most baller move that he's ever made.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the most
she could have been there to
decision.
She could have been there to tell him not to take King's Landing so seriously, or so literally.
That's good.
Thanks, Jocka Scavenger on Reddit. I'm sure that probably was copied from 50 other people on Twitter and everything else. The hive mind agrees.
But it was the way that scene was shot. It was really beautiful. You had it framed with him in that window, and you kind of have him looking out over the, all the destruction, and he sort of goes off frame, and he takes off his crown, and he comes back into frame, and just steps up into the window and doesn't even hesitate. It's not
he
like
just walks forward, like just right off of there. Yeah.
So I'm kind of miss him because her kids in general, except for the monster.
Joffrey,
thank you. So many names. I am so sorry, and it's almost 10 o'clock on a Sunday night. But except for Joffrey, her kids were fine. Like, they were good kids, and he was a good kid, and despite the fact that he wasn't, like, a super strong king, I didn't hate him. I would have liked to see how somebody like that could have grown in the Game of Thrones universe if they hadn't had to have him be like this. So it's kind of a bummer for him and for her, really, that now she's sort of lost her soul, right? Like, these are the things that grounded her kids, and now they're gone. Like, this is the last one. What's going to hold her back? Where's the mother's mercy going to be now?
Yeah, there is none. Like, she's basically just a husk, and it's going to be really, really bad for King's Landing and for everybody else. Because she's not the military-minded person to really handle what's coming either.
Speaking of the Lannisters, we move on to Jaime and Bronn hanging out with the Freys. Walder Frey's throwing a big party, and Jaime's not really having that much fun. He's annoyed by Walder. He kind of gets into... Of course, him and Bronn go back and forth a little bit and have some fun. But he's
Jaime
also...
plays like ultimate wingman for Bronn.
He's got his woman that he's interested in. He doesn't really need all these others.
Yeah.
I did love Bronn sort of saying, like, what if I'm not in the mood? And then he just looks at him and he's like, all right, yeah. But Jaime, and Walder Frey talk, and Walder Frey's like, yeah, we're allies, right? And Jaime says, the fact that we had to come out here to deal with this little problem for you makes our allyship seem less and less valuable to me. Which was a great dig. Knowing how this ends, I mean, it's not like that's going to end up being the worst thing for Walder Frey, but it was still great to see him get put in his place by Jaime before he gets put in his final place at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
So that is, that was a lot of fun.
I was kind of wondering if Jaime was going to do something with it, like the way the tone of the scene was going, how pissed he was. The way the Lannisters were around, like, it almost felt like they were just going to be like, you know what, this this isn't working out, and we're just going to take the twins.
I don't think Jaime has the authority for that. He doesn't know about anything that's happened in King's Landing yet, obviously. He's not going to just decide to do that without the king's, say-so. But he would... Here's what I liked about this episode. It felt like if you never got any more Game of Thrones, this would be a pretty cool end to the series. Like,
it definitely had that scale to it.
Well, and there was a lot of wrapping up, too. It's not like... I mean, there are things where they're saying, like, okay, we're going to see this coming, but it was told in such a way that it felt like a climax rather than a cliffhanger, which I liked a lot.
Yeah, because we've gotten a few too many seasons where it's like, oh god, are they alive? What's going on? Like, all that. This one was probably the most complete, where you get a few storylines set up, you say goodbye to a lot of people, you lighten that burden on HBO for paying high-class actors. It's good things.
We moved back to a small scene with Qyburn and Cersei where they're trying to decide what to do with the body. And this one, I was actually a little bit surprised by, because there was a part of me that thought, okay, Tommen's dead, Qyburn's there, Qyburn brings people back to life. Cersei is just adamant about loving her kids and, sort of fighting this fate thing. So I was for real expecting her to say, nuh-uh, he's not dead. Bring him back. You know how to do it. Maybe it's just because she knows what happens and she understands that it's not a real legit process, and Robert Strong isn't what the Mountain was, although that guy was never much of a talker anyway.
Yeah.
But
like, the most talking we saw was him yelling stuff and cutting people up.
For her to just say, hey, burn him. I mean, that scene was okay. I'm glad that, they sort of put a lid on that. Maybe that was why. Maybe they wanted to show us that, no, she's not quite that crazy. Don't go speculating that Tommen's going to come back as zombie Tommen, because that's not what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But that's where I thought that scene was going when it first started. And apparently not.
It was a little bit strange to see that reaction, but I think she also is just like, burn him and do it there. Don't put him with I guess all the king's ashes and everything were in the sept, weren't they? Like, she said that he deserves to be with his sister and his brother and everyone else.
Well, I think what she's saying is they weren't ashes before she blew them up.
That's true.
They were bodies buried there, and she's like, we're just gonna... Everybody's cremated now, so why not him too? The next scene brings us back to Sam and Gilly, who I'd kind of lost track of a little bit. They've finished their journey to, I think it's Bravos?
No, it's not Bravos. It's the Citadel.
What's the name of the city?
I thought it was just Oldtown, but I might be mistaken. Let me look up the Citadel while you explain the scene.
Okay. They get to wherever it is that the Maesters are stationed, and there's a great shot that we don't get explained until later, but it still was really beautiful when he sees the Maesters' tower, their big sort of university tower or whatever, just spewing out thousands of what they call white ravens, that are going out. And it gives you a sense of how big this world is, despite the fact that we see only a few houses. I mean, it's a big world even in what we see in the show, but obviously there's many more Maesters out there than we've ever seen. There's many more places that are needing to get warned about the winter that's coming, and they're warning all of them. And the really slow bandwidth internet is sending out the signal, hey guys, winter is here. Which will pay off a little bit later with the scene between Jon and Sansa directly, but that was cool to see. And then Sam and Gilly go into the Maester's place. This was a little bit... This scene actually does happen in the books, although not exactly like this. Like, he gets sort of... I don't want to say stood up, but they make him, like, wait outside for a long time, and I forget exactly how it plays out, but I don't remember him getting into the library and seeing everything. But it was nice to see him get into the library and see everything. Especially something that I didn't notice until somebody pointed it out on Reddit. The big, like, chandelier thing they have is the opening, like, sun credits thing.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't notice that either.
Yeah.
And just so you know, this is in Oldtown is the name of the town. The Citadel is there, and it's on the island with Dorne and Highgarden, and it's basically just a little bit further from the main continent of Westeros.
Okay. But it's also good to know that Dorne and Highgarden are on the same continent because that plays in a little bit.
It's called The Reach.
It was, he has to leave.
Actually, this is just showing it's like a state part of Westeros. Sorry.
Okay. Gilly and Sam Jr. get left behind, and obviously you can't tie up every single thread, but it does kind of make me wonder, where is that thread going to go? How difficult is it going to be for her living alone in the city with a child while he's studying? Or will they live alone? Will he have to live there with the Maesters at the Citadel? I don't know how that's going to work.
Yeah. Once again,
it does make me worry a little bit for her.
It might have been better for him to just leave her back at his family home.
Yeah, but yeah, maybe. Hopefully not. Hopefully that it won't be worse for her here than it would have been there. But that's a little sort of tying up loose ends scene, and I say tying up loose ends, also setting up things for next season, because I'm sure we're going to see Sam learning things and digging into the lore of, because we still need the wall to come down. I mean, for the series to progress, the dead have to be able to get through the wall, and that is going to happen. And Sam's, I'm sure, going to be finding out stuff about that in the coming seasons. But we move forward to Winterfell, where Davos and Melisandre have a big showdown about the stag that Davos found in the last episode.
And this didn't go exactly how I thought how I thought it would go down. I've been doing a lot of reading in the past week about what might happen. I thought Jon was going to execute her.
I think Jon is getting sick of executing people. I think that he's not the hard-nosed man that his dad was. He had to kill the men who killed him, and they were, up until that point, his friends and his allies, and I think he's looking for any opportunity to show people mercy.
Yeah.
It may come back to bite him, but I don't think he's in that mindset at all.
I was just reading about the idea of how it could have actually revealed him to be the Azor Ahai. Because there were a lot of people saying that if he was the one to, say, cut off her head, the lifeblood of her might have actually imparted powers of, what's the sword's name? Lightbringer? That would be the confirmation for Azor Ahai.
Okay.
Which would make him the one that was promised from the Red God. So
doesn't conquering Winterfell make him the one that was promised? Because that's what she saw in the flames, that whoever, Azor Ahai was on the winning on the walls of Winterfell?
Yeah.
It's either him or Sansa, or possibly Sir Davos.
Yeah.
A dark horse candidate. It was me the whole time, the Onion Knight. Good night, folks. That's not what Sir Davos sounds like, but...
No, Sir Davos has got, one of those very, very characteristic Game of Thrones voices. He's also in all sorts of horror movies now. It's kind of interesting to see.
I did like that he got this out, that it wasn't just... the moment where he finds the stag... last episode was really good, and he pulls it out of the ashes. You have that great shot with the sun coming up behind him or going down behind him, and just beautiful cinematography in the previous episode, where he finds that. But to have him say, just lay out all the charges, hey, you murdered her, she was a good person, she didn't deserve to die, and see all that in his eyes, to see how much he cared about this little girl.
It's literally the girl who taught him to read. He had such a good connection with her.
Right. And you see that Melisandre isn't all haughty necessarily, and what, I don't know what you're talking about. Why would you, she's affected by this. She's still, it hurts her that this is what she did, but she also says, listen, it wasn't just me. The king did it. The queen did it. And kind of defends herself a little bit, but also says it must have been what the Lord of Light wanted, and hey, Jon Snow's here because of what the Lord of Light wanted, which makes a really interesting conundrum, because Davos is right. If your god is making you kill little kids, might not be the right god, but he sure does seem to be backing Jon Snow right now.
Yeah. It's a very complicated story in there. She's told to ride south, and if she ever comes back, Jon will kill her, and if she comes back and Jon doesn't, then Davos definitely will.
And we follow that scene up with the scene between Jon and Sansa. And this scene didn't necessarily grab me as... Not that it wasn't a good scene, but I didn't put as much emphasis on it when I first saw it as I did, until I did when I saw the closing episode remarks in the After the Thrones thing, where they were talking about the King in the North comments and Sansa not trusting Jon, and Sansa, being shut out of the talks when they were planning the battle. And this scene where Jon tells Sansa, "Hey, you should be the queen," and knowing how this episode plays out is, I think, really important, because she says to him, you're Ned Stark's son. You could probably, pull this thing off if you wanted to. And he says, "No, you're Stark blood. I mean, you have the Stark name, and I'm putting you up in the Lord's, room, the sort of the king's, the Lord of the Castle's room."
Yeah, the king's quarters.
And I don't know if you call him a king. I mean, Ned Stark wasn't a king at the time, but then Robb was, so whatever. But the guy whoever's in charge of
call it the master bedroom if you have to.
Okay, fair enough. He's putting her up in the nice suite, the master bedroom with the king size bed, literally, and she said they have this back and forth, and he says to her, "Hey, you know what? You can have it. I don't want it. I don't need to be, the Lord of Winterfell, and they're not going to accept me anyway." And knowing what happens next makes that conversation feel a little bit more portentous to me than it did before I started thinking about it, because Sansa, she has this offer from Littlefinger, as we'll see in a little bit, and Jon, as we also see in a little bit, is taking that that leadership role that she probably should rightfully have. I mean, he is not a Stark by all the rules. He's not, and also not by blood. Well, I guess he's Lyanna's son, but
yeah, which that comes later too.
That comes later too. We're getting ahead of ourselves, but there's a lot of stuff happening in this scene that I didn't realize. It didn't hit me until I thought about it later, and they were talking about it later. But the big thing that obviously happens in the scene is that they say winter is here.
Yep.
Your meme from season 1 finally paid off.
You see the white ravens coming in, which we kind of skipped over that, but the first time you see the Citadel, you see thousands of white ravens leaving, and I thought that was a pretty
I didn't
cool
skip over it. I absolutely talked about that while you were looking up what the Citadel was.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was reading. Anyway, onward.
But they talk about getting the white raven, and we pay off the winter is coming, and then immediately cut to somewhere where winter is not there yet, at least not visibly, although it will be interesting to see how many of these places actually do get cold and frozen.
Yeah, if it's close enough to the equator that it wouldn't matter.
That doesn't seem like that's how it works in Game of Thrones world.
No, especially because the winter will last several years.
Right, and plus the White Walkers will come and bring the cold with them. Like they don't survive in the heat. I don't think they're a warm weather type zombie. But Olenna and the Sand Snakes are together, and we get the idea that the Sand Snakes have called her, where she doesn't really trust them. She says, "Listen, you killed your brother. I'm a Tyrell, and I know you guys have a thing against me. So what is this about?" And the Sand Snakes are there to make an offer, which I'm really, really glad that they put the scene in here, because I've been complaining for the whole season that these guys have done nothing. And I didn't need them to do a lot. I mean, I didn't need them to be an integral part of the show, but I did want them to bring them back.
Well, they were a primary part of the first episode, so it's like it felt like something had to happen.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like they had their big thing in the first episode and then nothing. And this was what I wanted. I needed them to be relevant, and even if they weren't necessarily big parts of the plot that we see, for them to come back where it wasn't just the one scene where they're like, "Oh, we killed our brother, and now we're done."
Yeah, and it makes so much sense as to what's happening whenever you see a certain bald man walk down the hallway.
He's still a man.
Yeah.
Just not as much of a man. And we see that they're all going to be working together. I guess he's securing their alliance with with Daenerys is the idea there.
Yeah. And whenever you actually see her ship sailing later, it doesn't entirely make sense, but you actually have the Martell flag, and you've got the Highgarden flag on a bunch of ships.
Okay. So I don't know all the flags, so I'm sorry. I didn't notice that. My eagle eye is not that eagle-y.
I know more of them this week just because at Denver Comic-Con there was a booth selling all of the house flags and everything. Even the way he introduces it is actually pretty awesome, too, because they're saying you need more than just land. You need vengeance, and basically what Varys says is fire and blood, which is actually the house words behind the Targaryens.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I'd forgotten that. I did know it at one point, but I'd forgotten that. I did also like how Olenna handles the younger Sand Snake. She's like, I don't have time for y'all. Shut up. Which is, I think, her saying what most of the audience was thinking from the previous season.
Yeah.
So that was nice to have her, come out.
Well, what does she have to lose anyway? Like, she's literally lost her entire family. She's in mourning colors.
She's not going to make more kids, right? She's not going. Her line is not going to continue. Everything as far as politics goes that she has, it's gone. She doesn't have any more heirs. She doesn't have any kids to set up for any marriages and stuff. All she can do is hit back as hard as she can for as long as she can until she's dead. And another part of Cersei's miscalculation, not thinking about the enemies that she's creating, or not being. I mean, granted, she couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah, she might. That was just like her using her trump card,
and it was the only card she had. I mean, I understand.
She also said like 6 times throughout the other seasons, like, I will burn this city to the ground if I have to. Like, she's literally said that like 5 recordable times.
The other thing, the thing that was had forgotten was there's a conversation between Olenna and Cersei that they reference in the After the Thrones thing, where Olenna earlier in the season asks Cersei, "What are you gonna do? Kill everybody yourself?" And it's like, oh,
close
crap.
enough.
I guess she will.
Man, it's good to have friends as loyal as Qyburn.
What do you think his? Do you think he just wants more corpses to experiment on?
No, like, I think he's in a game for power. Did you notice that he had the Hand of the King thing on him?
The hand is not that... I mean, he's not going to become king.
He's second in command, though. He went from being a disgraced maester to second in command because of her faith.
I guess.
So his position has moved up quite far since the beginning.
It does. I mean, bringing back Robert Strong, I think, did a lot for him. Blowing up all those people is... Well, there's nobody left.
Yeah. Like, King's Landing is so devoid of high-end characters right now that it's kind of weird.
We'll get into that in a little bit when we talk about her coronation, but moving on to Meereen, Daenerys dismisses, what is his name, Dario?
Yeah, it's Dario or Dahario, depending on how you pronounce it.
Okay. Her lover boy, she says, hey, listen, I'm going to go conquer some lands, and it turns out when you're a queen, you got to maybe sometimes be open to marrying a king, and guys feel a little bit threatened if there's another man in the situation, so you stay here.
Especially a man that leads a very, very rowdy army.
Yeah, and looks like that. Which is, his plea to her is really, really genuine, and it's nice to see that not everybody in this universe is out for power. He doesn't care about power, he likes her.
Yeah.
He wants to be with her.
And it's unusual for him because he's the type of guy that's probably bedded almost any girl he's ever wanted to. And for him to actually like find someone that he has that sort of connection with might be the first time. And he kind of talks about like, how is he even supposed to find that again?
I did like her line though, where he says, you know, who's supposed to come after you? And she's like, I'm sure lots of people will come after me. Okay, you'll be fine. And it does make me wonder what he'll do in her absence. I don't think he's gonna stab her in the back or anything, but how difficult will it be to keep the peace in Meereen when she's gone?
And now the newly labeled Dragon's Bay instead of Slaver's Bay.
Right, and she's talking about, she says the people are gonna choose their leader. I mean, the people of King's... She's not talking about letting the people of King's Landing choose their leader, so a little bit hypocritical there, Daenerys, but okay.
Well, she's got a score to settle, then she could talk about democracy.
Yeah, maybe. She's not going to have any kids, so... Well, unless... Man, like, that's reaching way back if we talk about the prophecy that people think that... what's-his-face might actually come back. Dag-nabbit, her hubby from the first season.
Oh, Khal Drogo?
Khal Drogo. There are people who believe that somehow he because of the way the prophecy was worded, that there is a way for him to get resurrected.
I think it's been a little bit too long for that.
Listen, I'm just saying, there's people who, when the sun sets in the east and when something runs with blood or whatever, and people look at that and they think, well, there might be ways for that to happen within the Game of Thrones mythology.
Yeah, or just clever wording for certain things.
Right. So I don't know, but man, it would be cool to see him come back as zombie Khal Drogo or spirit Khal Drogo and join her by her side. But you know, and the great thing about this scene, she goes, you know, she leaves him and goes to Tyrion, and I thought the best bit of this was she says to Tyrion, I'm worried because I didn't feel anything when I dismissed him.
She's gone callous.
Yeah, she's sort of losing her humanity, and that's something to be afraid of. Sort of similar to how it's scary for Cersei not to have any connections. It's a little bit scary for Daenerys not to have these connections as well.
And in that same thing, it seems like Tyrion is kind of trying to help bring that back to her. He's very candidly telling her like how he believes in her, how there's been a lot of times where he hasn't had any sort of like person to really guide him and take him to where he needed to be as a person, and she is that person.
And his admission that he believes in her, that he's the cynic, and yet he believes in her more than anything he's ever believed in his life. That's a pretty serious admission to make, and she rewards him by giving him the Hand of the King status.
Yep. So he is now second
Queen
to her.
I'm sorry, Hand of the Queen.
Hand of the Queen.
Which he had in King's Landing for a little bit.
And he did a good job with it. Well, he had it before
his dad came in.
And then he shot
his dad in the gut.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, Tywin took it before then.
Yeah.
He somehow lost it whenever he won the Battle of Blackwater, or his strategy did. I still didn't understand
Tyrion
that.
keeps getting crapped on.
Yeah.
Listen, it's not a great life for him. It is not a wonderful life in Tyrion land. But you know where it is a wonderful life? With Walder Frey and his...
and the return of Hot Pie.
This was maybe my favorite scene in anything of Game of Thrones. It was so creepy. The way it built up, you know...
it's just him alone in his hall.
Well, right, and the way... So he's in the hall. It's mostly dark. You know, there's a few candles lit, which I love how dark it is at the Frey's place.
There's a lot of that in this episode, too. Like, it's really dark in the throne room later, too.
Yes, which is legit, because that's how it was. If you didn't have big windows, candles don't put off that much light, you guys. But, you know, the maid comes up and brings him his meat pie, and he slices in and has a good bite. And he says, "Where are my sons? Why should I take them?" And she says, "They're here, my lord." And it's just so convinced and, like, not nonchalant, but like, don't you understand? They're here. And the way she delivered that line was so chilling, and I didn't know it was coming. I didn't know exactly what was going to play out. I was looking at it thinking, is he gone crazy? Like, has he lost his eyesight somehow? Like, what? Like, that was where mine was going, because of how convinced the girl who, you know, what Sansa's face played, or not Sansa, I'm sorry, Arya's face was playing, said that line. I didn't know what was going on. And then when she pulled the face off and, like, it was so perfect. It was such a great moment because you see him, like, just wondering, and then she pulls that piece of the pie off, and you see, what was, like, an eyeball or something? I think
it was like
there?
A finger crawling, like, kind of pointing out of it.
Okay, again, because it was so dark, it was a little bit difficult to tell, but, you knew, like, they're baked into the pie. Which is there's a whole old legend in the books talking about some of the...
They actually put it into the episode, too. Like, Bran was talking about it around the fire. He was talking to Rick and Asha and everybody else up there about how, like, this Rat King guy basically didn't protect the people in his house, and his sons ended up getting cooked into a pie. So, something that paid off 4 seasons later.
Okay, yeah, I remember that episode, that scene now. Oh, man. A lot of stuff in Game of Thrones to unpack. This is another episode that was over an hour long, I think.
Yeah, it was...
no commercials or anything.
70 minutes, so it's pretty much a short movie.
It was... This scene just blew me away, and it was so satisfying. And this is one of the reasons, of the many, that I felt like this is... The way this episode wrapped up just felt like this could be the end of the season and we'd be good. I mean, the episode, like, end of the series. I want more, but at the same time, like, there's enough here where I don't feel like I have to have...
Well, it's enough that I'm not going to be, like, sitting here, like, super, super angry that Game of Thrones is over for a year, and then we're going to have a short season next year, according to some of the directors in Vanity Fair magazine. Like, that's still not 100% confirmed, But it seems pretty much like they're going to do it the way they did with The Sopranos, where it's like between 6 and 8 episodes for the season split in half. It's a little bit weird.
Well, speaking of weird, Littlefinger and Sansa are having their little conversation, and we get this is partial part of the payoff I was talking about earlier with Jon and Sansa's conversation earlier, where Littlefinger tells her, "Hey, listen, I'm into you. I'm gonna have the Iron Throne, and I want to have you next to me. And every decision I've ever made has been to bring that about." Which kind of makes me wonder what he was thinking, selling her off to Ramsay Bolton.
Yeah.
I know that
I honestly think that was like one of the few full miscalculations that he's made. I think he didn't know anything about Ramsay and just decided to do it because he thought he would take care of it before anything could get too bad.
Well, he didn't, and that was maybe, not only was that a miscalculation in the terms of he's not, he can't get Sansa if he's married to Ramsay, which I don't know if he was going to go to war with him later or kill him off and try to steal her away.
Him off.
Okay.
That or he was going to challenge the legitimacy of his bastardship and all this other stuff.
But he does profess his interest. I hesitate. I said love earlier, but I hesitate to call it love. His interest in her, and say, listen, this is basically everything that drives me. I want to get the Iron Throne, and I want you next to me. Say yes. And she doesn't. She walks away. But again, that idea is there that she could be with this guy who is on his way to do great things, and he has his flag pledged to the Starks. But anyway, that's complicated and interesting, and I'll finish talking about that with the King in the North scene. We do get our great payoff for the R plus L equals J people, though, in the next scene, where Bran has his...
We're back at the Tower of Joy.
Yes, he wargs out. Cold Fingers leaves him, or his Uncle Benjen. I'm sorry, Cold Hands. For those of you, he's not called Cold Hands in the episode, so maybe it's just his Uncle Benjen zombified. You don't have to. Maybe it's not exactly crossed over in the books, but whoever, whatever you want to call him, leaves him on his own. Says, "I can't go any further. There's magic here that stops the dead from traveling any further, and until the wall comes down, the magic will stay there." He wargs into the Tower of Joy and sees young Ned Stark go up to the tower, find Lyanna all bloody from sort of her not failed childbirth, but a bad childbirth. Complications, yes. And we get the scene that I think this is the one thing that I've always felt like this has to be true at this point. It was the one fan theory that I needed to be real, and I'm glad they paid it off. She says to Ned, protect him, make sure that he's safe. If you tell him who he really is, Robert's going to kill him. And, you zoom in on the baby's face, and then they cut to Jon Snow's face, which I was glad that they did that, and they didn't actually say. And he says, "I'll call you Jon Snow." Like, there wasn't any...
I'm sure that was in the original script, and they're like, "That's dumb. We're gonna come up with a better way of doing this." Rather than the like Luke, Leia type thing we got in, like at the end of episode 3.
I would have been okay with that. I'm mocking it, but it's not the worst thing I've ever heard. And I kind of was expecting it, but the way they did it, just cutting to Jon Snow at Winterfell, and especially the way the rest of that scene plays out, I think was really effective. And we do see Jon Snow at Winterfell. He's there, trying to muster the houses together. They're still having their same problem of, we don't want to fight with the wildlings. Well, we fought with the wildlings just fine, and now, and everybody's squabbling together. And then Lyanna Mormont stands up and puts them all in their place.
Season 6 MVP Lyanna Mormont.
Yeah, the only thing I'm sad about is that she wasn't like in the battle with a little sword, just like hacking at somebody in the previous episode, because that's something I needed to see.
I'm sure that she was willing, but I think that they might have been like, you know what, this might be a losing battle. Let's not have Lady Mormont die at 11 years old or 12 years old.
With just all of her men, and Ramsay will come for her anyway. There probably would have been the most merciful death she could have. Anyway,
yeah.
Now let's not unpack that too much. But she comes down and she says, "Hey, listen, you guys didn't, Jon Snow asked for you to help, and you said no, and you were pledged to him. Well, I'm gonna, I remember, the North remembers, and we're gonna do the King in the North." And
She, like, dresses them all down, too. She's like, House Glover, you didn't answer the call. Like, she goes through, like, all these different houses. House Manderley, you did not answer the call.
And everybody, raises their swords for the king in the north. They're all shamed into it. I mean, they should be. They didn't do what they said they were. They didn't honor their commitments. But we all know how well the whole King in the North thing went for Robb Stark, and seeing Sansa there and seeing Littlefinger there,
especially the look Littlefinger gives.
Right, he's not really happy.
He's not impressed either.
And Sansa, Jon had said to Sansa, "Hey, listen, you can rule here." And now they're all pledging for Jon.
Yeah, the White Wolf.
Yeah, and I don't know how that's gonna go, but it would be. I just don't know, but I think it's an interesting possibility that they end up fighting against each other, or that she at least has her own power move where she says, "Okay, you're gonna be the king in the north. I'll go with Littlefinger and be queen over there because he wants to be queen, like the king, not king in the north. Like go to King's Landing and I'll be queen again, and then I'll shank him." And
yet at the same time, she did reject Littlefinger, and at a different time, Jon was telling her that they have to trust each other because of their new enemies. And she seemed to be all right with that. She seemed like she was apologizing to him for hiding the Knights of the Vale and everything else. So it feels like they're closer than they've been, despite everybody else declaring him king right now.
Maybe. I'm just worried. I wonder where that's going to go and what she's going to think and how it's going to play out. I just don't know. And I guess we'll have to wait and see.
It might also end up being like the way they kind of temper things with her marrying Littlefinger, and like basically Jon is loyal to her, so they're not going to like have this big issue with Littlefinger. Who knows? There's a lot that could happen there. I don't think it's going to go as sour as some people are saying it is.
Okay, well, I'm one of those people that saying it might go really sour, especially if Jon
I don't think it's going to be by
her.
Sansa's hand.
Maybe. I think if Jon continues to underestimate her as a tactician, as someone who understands politics now, because last time he saw her, remember, he's still operating under the assumption, and it makes sense, because last time he saw her, she was the sort of young, stuck-up, prissy girl who thought that marrying, not Tommen, that Joffrey would be the greatest thing ever, and she would get to be queen and wear all the pretty dresses, and she is not that person anymore.
No, she's definitely gone cold.
If he continues to treat her and assume that she is like that person, she could. I don't know, man. I don't know how it's going to work. I don't see her completely stabbing him in the back directly, but I also could see her working against him behind the scenes in a way that really comes back to bite him. So I don't know. That's all prediction stuff. But we are speaking of people becoming king or queen.
Well, let one last thing on that.
What? Okay, go
does
ahead.
it change anything if she finds out that he's possibly Targaryen and full Stark? Like, does that change any way that she would look at him?
I don't know. I don't think so, because she didn't care that he was a bastard before.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
but like, she also is a little more okay with him being kind of king because he's Ned's son. Like, she uses she says that like Ned's blood is in him,
which it isn't. Admittedly, yeah. I don't.
Unless things got real weird and some really bad stuff happened.
I don't think that. No, I'm pretty
it's
sure
not
they
a
weren't
Lannister
doing any
situation.
Targaryen stuff.
Yes. Anyway, onward.
Can I backtrack to that scene just a little bit and say Lyanna was supposed to be the face that launched 1,000 ships? The woman they got to play her, despite the fact that she may not have been in her best mode, having just given birth and kind of
bleeding
not feeling well, did not strike me as the kind of woman that would start a war that would, sort of tear the kingdom apart.
I always thought it was more of like how she acted than how she looked, because the stuff I had read is that she wasn't like, she was a little bit more like Arya, where she was like pretty, but she wasn't like that.
Okay, that was just the thing that I thought. Maybe I'm being super shallow. I probably am. But it just crossed my mind.
I mean, how would you look if you had just given birth and were bleeding out?
If I had just given birth, I would be pulling my fist in the air like, oh yeah, first time.
Scientific anomaly. It's like the aliens in The Sims.
I'm going to be
supposedly.
rich. I'm going to go on the speaking circuit and write a book and Be set up. I don't have to do this podcasting gig anymore. Or I could just do podcasts about how I gave birth when I was a man.
I mean, I'm sure it would boost our numbers.
But, as I said, moving on to the kinging and or queening of various individuals, Cersei back on top because there's nobody left.
Yeah.
There's nobody left to be king and or queen.
Yeah, she gets coronated, and she's got, like, this really weird kind of dark crown and a very non-joyous ceremony. Like, everything is just quiet and not settled right. And you've got Jaime walking in, and Jaime kind of had, like, he looks a little bit concerned, or a little bit confused, but very, very concerned. Like, things just aren't going well for Jaime.
Well, and his sort of ride back to King's Landing and find everything in ruins. Like, that was what I was talking about earlier. Like, it's still smoking when he gets back, and the assumption is that it's at least, like, several days, if not a week or a month later.
Yeah,
and the fires are still burning.
I'm sure wildfire burns a little bit differently, too. I'm sure it's, like, it just spreads so far. I can't even imagine. And, like, to come home and see that your son is dead now, too, after, like, we talk about how Cersei has to be destroyed by it. Like, I know he was a little bit more hands-off with his kids, but he obviously loved the kids. To see, like, his son gone, too, and now it's just all gone, and she's the one in power.
Yeah. Okay. Remind me again why he can't be king?
Because he took the oath saying that he couldn't have any lands or anything like that because he was Kingsguard.
Right, but didn't he get demoted from Kingsguard?
Yep. So I think he probably could, but maybe because he wasn't around, or who knows.
Okay.
Maybe because it's technically the Baratheon quote-unquote line on the throne, and, like, because she was married into that line.
Oh, that's right. Okay, I got you now. He doesn't have legitimacy there. Stupid question.
We saw a couple lines get completely finished off today. Like the Tyrells, like, there's probably some cousins or anything, or things like that might take over. But there really aren't many Baratheons left. Like, I'm sure Dragonstone has some, but it's like a family that's no longer in power. There's like 3 or 4 of them that have just been wiped off the show.
Yeah, and that is something that I wanted to talk about, for sort of going forward to the next season, is there are way fewer characters now that can be in play, especially in King's Landing. It's basically King's Landing is Cersei now.
Yeah.
And, maybe Jaime a little bit, but there's nobody else to oppose her that I can think of, is there?
I mean, maybe there, like we were talking about earlier, there could be like some rebellions or something, but I really don't see anything else getting in her way.
I guess, yeah, we could have some new characters, but as far as, like, I was wondering, how are they going to wrap this up? How are they getting through with this? How are we going to finish all this up in two 6-season episodes? And if we don't have any other characters, that's how.
Yeah. It's basically going mono-y-mono for a lot of these things. Cersei has the entire armada of, like, the Targaryens coming down on her. And everything else.
That was a great sort of Stephen King in The Stand moment where he, you simplify a lot of things by killing a bunch of people off in a big explosion. So
you get stuck, kill them all.
I don't know that they were stuck, and I wonder how this is going to play out in the book. I don't know if it's exactly going to be the same way, but it does... It makes the ending of the show seem a lot simpler than it has been. And then, of course, we get our great big grand finale wrap-up, the final ending. There's a lot of endings in this. I'm joking with you before we started that this feels like Lord of the Rings Return of the King a little bit, where he's like, and this, plot line finished up to a pretty good satisfaction, and this plot line had a pretty big ending, and this plot line. And now we finally end with the Dragon Fleet, all of Daenerys' ships from her various alliances setting sail for Westeros. The one thing I was disappointed was I didn't notice any horses on the ships.
There are actually, like, they actually show that from, like, you see a view from the undercarriage of the ship looking upwards as horses are eating as a dragon flies over the top.
Okay, I must have missed that particular bit then, and I'm sorry. I wanted to see more horses on the ships. I wanted to see the Dothraki being like, oh, what's going on with this poison water?
Yeah, I just wanted to see one Dothraki, like, throwing up over the side on one of the ships.
Yeah, I know that would have been sort of breaking the immersion of the scene, but that would have been great. But no, she has her great glorious moment. What's his face? What's the bald dude?
Varys.
Varys is fast traveled back to wherever they were Although I guess they are they on the same continent, or is that not the same continent anymore?
I need to see a bigger map because the map only showed parts of things.
Okay. He's made it, but somehow he's made. I thought that was one of those things where I was like, I'm gonna give you guys a pass on this because I'm not that nitpicky kind of guy. But it does a little bit bug me that he made it back after just having been with the Sand Snakes.
Yeah, and the fact that they would have, like, in my eyes, with the geography, like they would have had to go around Westeros to bring the Martell ships and then move in an armada to the other side. It was a little bit weird there, but they're trying to capture the imagery of a gigantic fleet going in to take out an already wounded King's Landing and basically dealing with the undead coming, the king in the north, and Cersei in the south. Because that's pretty much all that's left.
How is King's Landing gonna even put up any kind of a fight?
Well, I know there are a lot of Lannister soldiers left, like thousands and thousands of them, but it's still gonna be, like, I think that they're just poised to be slaughtered. And if they fall quickly, then they're gonna be dealing with, like, the Whites and like the Night King and everyone coming up that way.
Well, I know that that's going to be part of the... I mean, I think that probably all of the final season will just be them fighting the Whites. And the way I imagine it happening is in the next season, you're going to have Daenerys taking King's Landing pretty handily. And finally, Cersei gets her comeuppance. And then...
Yeah, I don't see any way Cersei could stop the dragons coming.
Whatever Jon is doing in the north, I don't think... I mean, his forces, despite the fact that they're united and despite the fact that Wall is still there, they're probably going to get overrun pretty bad, and Jon's going to have to flee south and and go to Daenerys and probably hook up.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking, too, is like, they talk a lot about marriage in this episode, and as much as people are shipping Yara and Daenerys and everything, I don't think that's quite going to happen. I think that it's more likely that she ends up with her half... I guess it wouldn't even be like half-brother, it'd be like kind of a cousin, because she's the Mad King's... Yeah, I'm trying to think of the lines. That would basically be her cousin. She's the Mad King's daughter,
and then her nephew? Mad King's brother...
Like half... Like partial...
No, it's cousin. It's cousin.
Yeah.
Their dads were brothers.
All right, yeah.
You're making it way more complicated than it has to be. But yes.
No, Jon would be her brother's son.
What? No. As Rhaegar?
I thought Rhaegar was the prince of the Mad King, Aerys.
I think he was... Prince just means he was I think he was the younger brother.
Could be.
Like, he wasn't on the throne, but he was still a brother.
If anybody wants to confirm this in the comments, I thought that he was Aeron's son because Viserys in the books blamed Daenerys for not being old enough for him to marry because he was all about, like, the sister-brother thing. Just a lot of weird things happening there.
Anyway, whatever the situation is, I'm sure because they're, Targaryens, she would be down with it. They never had any problem with it before, and
it's not like she's known him her whole life. It's not like, oh, he's like my brother.
Yes. So, and clearly genetics isn't a big deal in this universe.
Yeah.
So I
always thought he looked a little more Baratheon than Targaryen, but that's just me.
He doesn't have that fair hair. That's true. But I think that that whatever Jon's defense is, there's going to be an episode where there's a big battle, and the Whites just mow down the Northmen, and he has to run to Daenerys. I mean, I hope
probably going to be in the crumbling shadow of the wall or something like that.
It could be. Maybe. Maybe he ends up able to team up with like the two armies end up being able to team up, but it seems like you're going to have to have a pretty bad defeat to set up, hopefully, what's a good ending. I would like to think that we don't end the series with, the Winter Kings, like, walking to the Iron Throne and sitting down.
I mean, I could see the Night King being the last one standing. It's kind of like what Joseph said about the show. It's a giant horror thing where if you were to go 200 years in the past, all this would be happening with different people. You go 200 years in the future, and it's just the same thing happening over and over and over again, and it's all just terrible misery. So maybe it would be a happy ending if the Whites took over.
Maybe. I guess we'll see. I'd like to think, Daenerys... Her whole thing, and she says this to Yara, in the previous episode, our fathers left the world a worse place, and we're going to leave it a better place. We're going to improve things. And I want to believe that that's possible.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm just not sure that their good intentions will lead up to that.
Well, you know what? There's only one thing to do, and that's to wait a whole nother year for another season of Game of Thrones.
Thank you guys so much for sticking with us through this whole season. It was an excellent one of my favorites overall. I know a lot of people, or I've seen a lot of people talk about how they think it was moving too fast, that they think that without George R. R. Martin's guidelines here, that it didn't feel exactly like Game of Thrones. I think they did a pretty damn good job. I enjoyed the season. I enjoyed talking to you guys about all this sort of stuff. And hopefully you'll be around next year, and hopefully you'll check out our other content on the channel. Give us a like and subscribe if you like this.
Yep, go to humanechoes.com for all of our other content, and we will hopefully see you guys next year.
Bye.
With more Game of Thrones recap. Yep.